Hello, my name's James. I'm a portrait photographer from Portsmouth in the UK. You've probably not heard of me, and I welcome you to a portfolio review video. We offer portfolio reviews here through the No Fuss Muss YouTube channel, where we invite photographers from all over the world to submit between 10 and 15 of their favorite images, and we celebrate them and have a look at them on this channel and try and offer constructive feedback as best as we can. Check out the playlist for more of these videos. The photographer who submitted their photos to our channel is John Pirtle. You can find him on Instagram at JTap4, and he photographs from Texas. We're getting someone all the way from Texas here, which is really, really exciting, specializing in sumo and judo. And just having a look at his Instagram account here, we can see there's a real sort of like a real range there from these events, plus other things there on the Instagram channel. But it's some interesting sort of attention to detail there with some of the work that's come through. John submitted images to us from big drive. There's a lot of images on this drive, so we couldn't like whittle it down to the number that we would ideally like to look at for a portfolio review. And when he was asking for what he wanted in terms of advice, he asked for advice, particularly in terms of editing. So I'm going to give a portfolio review today, maybe not looking so much at the photographic elements, things like composition, things like lighting, stuff like that. But we're just going to have a look at that whole folder, pick out a few images as we go through. We'll look at them together and we'll have a look at what we look at as photographers from an editing point of view in terms of culling, in terms of choosing which photographs we're going to select to showcase out to the world. Because it's something that I see a lot with sort of new photographers in the industry, where you have these cameras that take thousands and thousands of pictures, and we're so emotionally attached to them, we don't know how to whittle them down and how to just showcase the best. Often, particularly with things like your Instagram profiles, that's your shop window. You want stuff on there that really, really stands out so that each image is pulling you in on its own individual merits. Images that stop the scroll. So just by looking at this drive, we will be able to have a look at how we would look at that process from a more professional point of view and start to pick out images and offer some feedback over the next 15 minutes. I hope you find this useful. We're going to go straight into the drive folder here. And as you'll see, there are just lots of images from these tournaments. And the first thing I would say is that when you're shooting in these tournaments, in these conditions, lighting is super, super tough. Quite often you'll have like, I've worked at it where we've sort of done wrestling shows where you've worked at a venue that has like fluorescent tube lighting, but some of the fluorescent tubes are kind of like blue, some are yellow, some sort of window light coming through as well, which is giving you a completely different color temperature. And color temperature is key in terms of consistency. So if you've got lights all around the arena that are sort of shooting out colors at different temperature, if you've got a window light that's coming in at a much cooler, bluer color temperature, and if, you know, as the case is here, that you've got blue and yellow mats and red gear that are reflecting the light in all kinds of different ways and all kinds of different color temperatures, it's going to be really, really challenging situations. You're going to have to work out how you manipulate that. What a lot of photographers will do in a low light situation, particularly in a low light situation where you have to boost the ISO up. And by boosting the ISO up, we are increasing the grain in the photograph. A lot of photographers will take the quote unquote artistic approach of channeling those images through a monochromatic post process, making them black and white and really enhancing and leaning into that grittiness and into that grain. The other thing we need to look at when we're working in low light conditions is there's two things we can consider. We can consider investing in a lens that opens up to a wider aperture. And the easiest way to do that is to invest in a prime lens. That doesn't give you the zoom capabilities and the flexibility with zoom, but it does allow the camera to let more light in, which allows you to shoot at higher speeds, freeze action better, and also allows you to come down on that ISO so you don't suffer from the grain. And it also gives you a narrower depth of field, which means that when we're shooting in environments, you know, like this, we're really isolating the fighters and the protagonists away from all of the elements and the distracting elements in the background. So having a look through the portfolio here, we can see that there are these challenging lighting conditions, but there are interesting elements within sort of like where we're working. Something like this, where we've managed to, we can see from the selection of images that the background's kind of cluttered. You've got the referee in there and you've got all sorts of distracting elements sort of going on. But here we've actually managed to get a hold, get feet off the floor mid-throw. We've managed to capture the action here as it's sort of going through. So this is it's a nice lower angle. Everything's kind of centrally placed. So if we can work with maybe working with compositions that aren't quite central, that draw our eye into the frame and let our eye sort of work around the frame, then that may give us a slightly different point of interest. And particularly here, this is an interesting one here, where we're sort of in the chokehold here. And you've got these leading lines of red and yellow. We're actually, funnily enough, the interesting thing here is we're actually working on a triadic color scheme. This is what I call the Superman color scheme, because it's they're all colors at even points on a triangular basis around the color wheel, and it's the colors shown off by Superman, red, yellow, and blue here, leading us up to blue. And these leading lines here could actually give us a really sort of interesting composition if we were to reframe it with that little referee there in the top right hand corner as well. Maybe even be more bold with the Dutch angle, turn it even more round, sort of 45 degrees round, and have a look at it from there. But yeah, when we start to then, the next series of images here start to look at, more down the line, straight down where all of these multiple fights in the tournament situation are happening. So you've got 4 or 5 fights going on there just in this one line. And maybe leaning into that, we've taken a slightly higher angle. So again, where we've got all of the things going on in the background, if we can really isolate these fighters in the foreground, then we can actually create some straighter lines, some straighter compositions. And the benefit here of we've managed to do it here on this one, where the lines are parallel through the mats in the background. And that in this instance here, where we've just got all these lines leading in, I always think if we're gonna go Dutch angle, go Dutch angle. Like if we're going to do a turn and we're going to slightly look at it from a slightly different angle, really go for it, or keep it completely parallel and completely straight. And there are things in Photoshop you can use to straighten up, and Lightroom as well, to straighten up those angles. And you've got these leading lines here that are going to help you sort of straighten those up and give you those slightly, those slightly more dynamic compositions. Again, we've managed to get a throw here, but everything sort of turned back to camera. And the funny thing about this one is that everyone is looking somewhere else. Everyone is looking at another fight that's happening on another mat. So in terms of the storytelling, it doesn't quite work. But then the following picture, I see where you stayed there and you've managed to keep shooting. And this is really cool, where we've got the throw, but just with the 1 foot on the floor. So you've got this tangle of bodies and feet and arms and everything up off the mat. You've just got that 1 foot on the mat there, which is really impressive. We're moving here now to a different arena here, and we start to see here where we have a drop off in exposure. We can see here it's a lot brighter in this image here and a lot darker in this image here. And that could simply be because of the mode that we're using in the camera. So if we're using something like a shutter speed priority or an aperture priority, it's going to amend the settings in the camera to suit what it thinks is an even exposure. Now, depending on the bracketing and where you've put the point on the camera as to where it's going to take that metering from, will depend on what exposure the camera does. You could have center weighted metering, which means it's going to look more towards the middle of where you're shooting within your frame and get your correct exposure from there. And then the other extreme of that is point metering, where it's going to literally look at the 1 point that you set in the camera to meter from. And then the other extreme from that is where you just go all out metering, where the camera's just going to look at the entire scene, take all the highlights, all the shadows, all those areas, and just go, right, that's the average for that. And working out what works best for you is going to lead you to get more even exposures all the way through. My guess is in this instance that there's some level of sort of center weighted metering here, because the referee is in white, and it maybe has dulled down the colors because it's focusing on the referee there to try and get that referee's jersey and everything. The camera doesn't know that it's white, it's trying to get it to gray, so it's underexposed the whole scene as a result. Good timing here on the throw, just cropped off the foot. So it's always a good idea just to crop a little wider if you can, and that way you'll manage to keep the whole scene in there. And then 2 good ones back to back here. This is a nice expression here. If we have the benefit of a zoom lens, we could potentially go even closer and just capture the action as it's going on around here, rather than having the distracting elements around. And then this one here, it's a good takedown, good use of color throughout. Yeah, nice shot there. Sort of simply done there. But with these things, it's difficult with the sort of combat sports, as we can see where we come in here, where everything's with the back to camera. And with these ones with the back's to camera, and we started to drop focus, and the mask's sort of coming up over the face, and our back's to camera there again and again. I would maybe just like, I wouldn't be looking using these in any way in terms of like showing off. You can certainly give them to the promoters, give them to the athletes in the match, but I'd be more looking at ups and downs, this sort of storytelling of the loser looking on with the victor there, and looking through there. This one here with the real aggression in the face there is a really, really good capture. Again, tells a little bit more of a story. And we're just looking at those whole scenes and how we can get from this one fight here. What images are we going to take? Are we going to be showcasing this image, for example, over and above something that has, a good center weighted balance, nice with the referee right in the middle there, and a good triangular shape through the whole thing? So even in these cluttered situations, we can pick up where we're creating shapes, where we're creating form, and where we're sort of really, really driving that from there. This is a good piece of isolation here, slightly distracting with the guy down here in the bottom right-hand corner, and with the hoop there. So the real simple situation to here is just to crop. If we just crop in here, and if we lose this tiny little bit of yellow here, then all of a sudden we've got an isolated picture against the background that has a lot more impact than the full frame approach there. This one here, we've got lines here that we can work with to try and balance this out and sort of showcase the whole arena, which is what we're trying to do. And again, we can see that as we're working through, we have sort of like drops off in exposure. And again, with these, although these lighting scenarios aren't necessarily, the best lighting scenarios for us to work with, they are at least going to be consistent. So what we can do is we can work out when we get there what our exposure is going to be. What aperture do we want to be shooting at for this sort of sporting element here, where there's certain elements where they're going to be fast moving, but not super fast moving. I would be aiming for a shutter speed of above 1/500th of a second, and then work out what ISO you need to use, and then just shoot on manual throughout the whole thing. Because we know that the lighting isn't going to change. So we're trying to give ourselves as photographers less things to worry about. And if I'm not thinking about aperture, and I'm not thinking about shutter speed, and I'm not thinking about ISO, then I can concentrate on angle, placement, height, position within the frame, composition of the piece, and what's going to happen and where I need to be, to get the best action shots there. Moving on from here, we have a slightly different arena here. So we just flick through some of these again. And again, we've managed to get ourselves in a good position. And what I really admire about this is that we're shooting all the way through the move. And this is good. So we're, on this throw, we can see the stages of the throw, which actually make a nice sort of like a set piece, sort of like an Edward Muggeridge set piece, where he used to photograph horses galloping and prove that the horse's legs came together and then went out like that. And I've always liked that sort of style of imagery there. Good face off here there with those guys doing together, and real raw power there. And you can see how much more impact this has when we don't have distractions in the background, when we don't have people or tripods. Maybe a referee might help the narrative here, but again, with just the fighters isolated, I really, really admire that shot here. We've gone more into close-ups here, looking over the shoulder, and we're just trying to get those sort of like intense moments. There's obviously a lot of, oh, that's a good throw there. And again, this throw on the angle is good with this sort of collision of legs, and love the branding in the background. But those ones where they're facing off, they're obviously concentrating very hard, so you're not always going to get those aggressive shows out. Good kick on the point. Foot right up in the face there. That's a really, really, really difficult skill to achieve. So yeah, admire that one in terms of the timing. Oh goodness me, and he's really planted head. But can we see what we're doing here now? This is interesting. I'm literally looking at this grid and just picking out the ones that I want to dive into a little bit more. You know, the ones that sort of convey a little bit of interest. And this one conveyed interest because of the shape and because I could see all blind what's going on. It almost looks like a DDT. This one looked interesting because we could see both combatants' faces and we were creating interesting shapes within. This is a nice little bit of attention to detail. I like this. Go even lower on this one if you can. Work out the angles that we can do and try not to place the boots just right in the center of the piece. Try and maybe have them off to one side and have that leading line of blue sort of bringing ourselves in there. A few more throws coming in here. And again, pretty good sharpness throughout. There seems to be a little bit more light in on here. And again, they seem to be fairly isolated around the background. That's an interesting throw there. And look at the intensity on the face there. And if we can get even, if we could be even braver at these events, like I know everyone's going to be, you know, crowd. There may not be that many photographers there, so just do your own thing. Provided you're not encroaching on the mat, you're fine. So if everyone's there, sort of just sat, just taking photos, well, how do I get a different angle? How do I shoot? How do I be like Neil Leifer and shoot something completely different? We're going to change the angle, and then I'm going to change it even further. And by coming down even lower in this instance, we may have got a really different angle where we really capture that expression of the throw coming through. This is interesting here with the tap out there, but unfortunately the heads are sort of taken away. And then if we can, for these show out shots where we show off who's up and who's down, if we can come round, take the photo from the front end. I'm guessing, I mean, there's not that many people here. I always think, you know, they may give you sort of like guides as to where you can and can't be. Sometimes at these events, it's, I don't know. There are occasions where it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. I know where I've been to sort of these events, you know, that is the case. So oftentimes, maybe just come around, try and get a slightly different camera angle there. Something really different going on here. We can see that the tones of the yellow are really coming up from the mat. Can you see? This is what I mean about, you know, light bouncing around the arena. It seems to be a lot less light in here. Certainly no window light coming in here. The light that is in the arena is at the top because we can see the sort of shine on the top of the head here, the shine on the top of the head here. So you're having down light coming down. It feels yellow light, and it's exacerbated even further by the yellow mat coming back up. And we can see that where these white judo suits should be white, right? They're white in real life, but they're not photographed light because the light is bouncing back up and giving us that yellow cast over the whole image. That hasn't stopped you getting great expression here, and that one close in there is a great shot. Lovely expression looking straight towards the camera here. Really interesting one here with the expression there and just kind of like an odd quirky image there. And then these ones are actually quite, they're really quite interesting. They're almost quite peaceful in the way that they're laid out, but I like your choice of depth of field as well, so that everything in the background has started to blur out, and we can isolate and really view. And, you know, you're drawing your viewer's eye to what you want them to see. That's the whole point of shallow depths of field, really, is that we're trying to, as a photographer, we're trying to show the viewer what we want them to see in the picture and get them to focus on that. Thank you so much. So I'm going to I'll keep that in. Who cares? We nearly did all of this in one take. Thank you so much to John, to JTap4 on the Instagram for submitting your portfolio for review. I hope you appreciate the feedback there. Keep doing this for the love of it. Keep doing it for the enjoyment of it, and keep looking for those moments, because there's going to be quick moments in there. You're going to get quirky moments. You're going to get quirky compositions and things that happen in those matches that really show off the intensity of a sport that you clearly have an affiliation for and a passion for, and that comes across. And as long as we're enjoying it and we're having fun, then it's a good thing, and it's something we should pursue and keep doing. If you'd like your own portfolio review, you can get one on my secret email address that's still active, portraitofawrestler@gmail.com. There are loads of other portfolio reviews up on here. You can have a look at them on our playlist here. So go back. We've even gone back and had a look at some pro photographers, some really established international award-winning photographer reviews. We've sat down with them and discussed their favorite images, why they're their favorite images, and hopefully you can get some tips from the more high-end part of our industry. Like and subscribe. Tell people about the channel. Have a look at some of our lighting tutorials. And if there's anything you would like to see in a future lighting tutorial for us, all you need to do is just drop a message below, and we'll try and do our very best. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. All the very best.